The 2000s. So the program was released in 1990, and by 2000 it had sold over 3 million copies, and that's just legally. It was presumed that it's used on millions more desktops through widespread software piracy. In September of 2000, September 1st in fact, version 6.0 was released. In 2002, this is when we see version 7.0 on March 1st of 2002, version 7.0. And a little bit more for change happened with this version. The healing brush was new and introduced, as was the patch tool, the ability to create custom brushes. Also, Photoshop added spell check and the find replace features. The code name for this version was Liquid Sky. In August of 2002, on August 1st, version 7.0.1 was released, and the main feature here was the Camera Raw plugin, which allowed imports from different digital cameras. 2003, on October 1st of 2003, we saw Photoshop version 8.0. And this was the time when we renamed it. So Photoshop, instead of it was Photoshop 6, Photoshop 7, now we called it Photoshop CS. CS standing for Adobe Creative Suite, the Creative Suite. So now we have Photoshop CS. And the code name for this was Dark Matter. The features for Photoshop CS in 2003, they added a counterfeit deterrence system, which recognized and refused to allow the duplication of paper currency. Scripting support for various web languages, including JavaScript. Layer groups were introduced in version CS, as was the live histogram. 2005, on April 4th, of 2005, Photoshop version 9.0 is released, and we call this Photoshop CS2. Code name was Space Monkey. So features of Photoshop CS2, we first saw the red eye removal tool, and this is helpful for red eye in photography. We also were introduced to the vanishing point tool. This is that little pesky tool. If you accidentally click on it, you all of a sudden get a grid thrown in perspective. Many people are frustrated with that because they're not really sure how to get rid of it. So that's the vanishing point tool. And then also smart objects were introduced, and this feature allows the user to scale a layer up without a significant loss of quality. So some significant advances with CS2. Now we go ahead 2 more years to 2007. This was the 10th iteration of the program, and it was Photoshop CS3, was released April 16th of 2007. And now the icon for Photoshop was modeled after the periodic table. And so with the whole Creative Suite products, they have matched new icons kind of to mimic the periodic table. Features of this 10th iteration of CS3, non-destructive filters. The quick selection tool, which many of you use and probably love, or you will, and the refine edge tool, which we will use when we remove fur or hair, try to select something. So those are some pretty significant advances again. It seems as though it's becoming exponential with the advances that we see in Photoshop. Now, an extended version was released in April 30th of 2007. And so consumers had the option of buying Photoshop CS3 or Photoshop CS3 Extended. And the extended version included some 3D, some scientific imaging, and high-end film and video. So it was just a little bit above and beyond what the typical Photoshop was. 2008, the very next year, in October, we see version CS4 would be the 11th iteration, and the code name was Stonehenge. So on October 15th, we saw this new release. And features of CS4, we had smoother pan and zoom capabilities, masks and adjustment panels was added. So many of you will use the mask and adjustment panel. So this was first introduced as CS4. And then color correction took a huge step forward.